The relentless Arizona sun, a brazen eye in the vast, cloudless sky, beat down on Elias Vance's weathered face, deepening the etched lines around his piercing blue eyes. His ranch, a cluster of stoic wooden structures, was an island in a sea of sun-baked plains, a sanctuary that often felt more like a solitary confinement. Dust devils, like miniature tornadoes, danced across the distant horizon, mocking the restless emptiness that stirred within his soul. He'd ridden to the remote station auction, not for the usual livestock, though his herd could always use fresh blood, but for something less tangible, something he couldn't quite name. Rumors, carried on the dry desert winds, had whispered of a peculiar lot being offered, something unusual. As he dismounted his horse, Whiskey, the familiar cacophony of the auction assaulted his senses. The lowing of cattle, the impatient whinnying of horses, the rough shouts and boisterous laughter of men. The air was thick with the scent of sweat, leather, and the pungent anticipation of a deal. Elias felt a familiar pang of loneliness, a constant, unwelcome companion in his isolated existence. He pushed through the throng, his gaze scanning the motley collection of goods, each item a silent testament to someone else's abandoned hopes or fresh starts. His eyes snagged on a small, huddled figure near a muddy trough where a few listless horses stood, their heads bowed against the heat. It was a woman, her clothes caked in thick, dark mud, her hair matted and disheveled, her face obscured by grime and shadow. She seemed utterly out of place, as broken and forgotten as a discarded dream. A strange, unbidden impulse stirred within him, a flicker of something he hadn't felt in years, a curiosity, a nascent empathy. He wasn't sure why, but he had to know more. The auctioneer's voice, booming and raspy, cut through the din. "Next up, this lot here. A strong pair of mares, good for ploughing or riding, and, well, this one here. No name, no papers, just she was found near the old tracks. Any bids for the lot?" Elias's hand, almost against his conscious will, began to rise. A sudden hush fell over the crowd, a mix of curious stares and open disdain for the unusual item. The oppressive heat of the afternoon seemed to intensify, pressing down on the scene. The dry earth beneath his boots felt hard and unyielding, much like the life he had carved out for himself. The sky overhead remained a relentless, piercing blue, offering no comfort, only an unwavering witness to the strange drama unfolding. He felt a bead of sweat trickle down his temple, but his gaze remained fixed on the silent, mud-stained figure. The bidding began, hesitant and low for the mares, almost non-existent for the woman. Elias felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He wasn't a sentimental man by any stretch, but something about her utter vulnerability, her profound silence, resonated with the quiet despair he often felt in his own life. Other ranchers grumbled, exchanging knowing, cynical glances. "What's a man gonna do with that?" One scoffed, his words cutting through the uneasy silence. Elias ignored them, his gaze fixed on her. She hadn't moved, hadn't even flinched, as if she were made of stone, impervious to the harsh judgment of the crowd. He raised his hand again, his voice firm, cutting through the murmurs. $50! A few gasps rippled through the onlookers. This was more than anyone expected for such a lot, especially considering the seemingly worthless human component. The auctioneer, a shrewd man with an eye for genuine interest, pushed harder. $50 for the lot. Any more? Going once? Twice? Elias's heart pounded against his ribs, a frantic drum in his chest. He still didn't fully comprehend why he was doing this, but he felt an undeniable magnetic pull towards her. "Sold to the gentleman in the back," the auctioneer declared, his hammer falling with a definitive, echoing thud. Elias felt a strange mix of relief and apprehension wash over him. He had bought a woman, a complete stranger, and he had absolutely no idea what he would do next. The murmurs of the crowd, now tinged with a mix of curiosity and thinly veiled scorn, followed him as he slowly, deliberately approached her, the dry dust crunching under his boots with every step. The air still hung heavy, but a subtle shift had occurred, a crack in the oppressive stillness of the afternoon. He could feel the weight of countless eyes on him, on her, as he closed the distance between them. A faint, almost imperceptible tremor ran through the woman, though she still didn't look up, as if fearing the gaze of her new owner. The sun seemed to dip lower, casting longer, more ominous shadows across the auction grounds, highlighting the stark reality of what had just transpired. As Elias drew nearer, he could discern the raw red scrapes on her hands, the angry tear in her faded, mud-caked dress. Her face, though still heavily smeared with dirt, hinted at delicate features beneath the grime, a fragile beauty obscured by hardship. He held out a canteen of water, its metal cool against his calloused hand. She didn't respond, her eyes still downcast, fixed on the muddy earth. He knelt slowly, trying to catch her gaze, his voice surprisingly gentle in the harsh landscape. "My name's Elias Vance," he said, the words feeling foreign and too soft in the open air. I bought you. I mean, the lot. You're safe now." He saw a subtle tremor run through her, a slight shift in her posture, almost imperceptible. He pointed to the sturdy wagon he'd brought, hitched to his two reliable draft horses. "Come on, we'll get you cleaned up and fed." Slowly, painstakingly, he helped her to her feet. She moved stiffly, as if every muscle ached, every bone protested the effort. Her body was a testament to unimaginable hardship. As he led her towards the wagon, he noticed the way her gaze lingered on the horses, a faint spark of something, recognition, longing, in her otherwise vacant eyes. It was the first true sign of life he had seen in her. He kept a respectful distance, understanding instinctively that trust would not be easily given, that her silence was a shield against a world that had clearly harmed her. The long journey back to his ranch was silent, save for the rhythmic creak of the wagon wheels on the dry, rutted road and the distant, mournful cries of coyotes as dusk settled over the plains. The air grew cooler, bringing with it the scent of sagebrush and damp earth. Elias stole glances at her, a profound curiosity stirring within him. He tried to decipher the story in her silence, the experiences etched onto her worn hands and haunted eyes. The setting sun painted the sky in hues of orange and purple, casting long, distorted shadows that danced alongside their wagon, a silent procession carrying an unspoken hope. Days bled into a week, then another. The woman, whom Elias had provisionally named Jane for lack of a better option, remained mostly silent, communicating through subtle gestures, a nod, a shake of the head, a slight inclination of her body. He had provided her with clean clothes, nourishing food, and a small, unused cabin near his own, a simple structure that offered privacy and shelter. She helped with chores, quietly and diligently, her movements becoming less strained with each passing day. She seemed to possess an innate understanding of animals, particularly the horses, which appeared to calm in her gentle presence, their nervous energy settling into a peaceful tranquility. Elias observed her patiently. He noticed her meticulous way of sweeping the cabin floor, her careful tending of the small garden he'd started, the way she would sit on the porch in the evenings, watching the vast, indifferent sky. He also observed the subtle flinches when a sudden loud noise erupted, the way her eyes would sometimes cloud with an inexplicable sadness, hinting at a traumatic past she wasn't ready to share. He respected her unspoken boundaries, never pushing, just observing, patiently waiting for her to open up on her own terms. He started leaving small gifts for her, a vibrant wildflower he found near the creek, a smooth, curiously shaped river stone, gestures that were met with a rare, shy smile, a fleeting glimpse of the warmth beneath her quiet exterior. The ranch, once a place of solitary routine and stark functionality, began to feel less empty, less desolate. There was a quiet companionship now, an unspoken rhythm that was slowly transforming his world. One crisp afternoon, after a particularly arduous day of mending fences under a brewing storm, Elias returned to find Jane sitting on the porch of her cabin, watching the darkening sky. The wind, a harbinger of the approaching weather, whipped her hair around her face, and a stray tear traced a clean, stark path down her grimy cheek. Elias approached cautiously, his boots making soft thuds on the dry earth. "Are you all right, Jane?" he asked, his voice softer than usual, carrying the weight of genuine concern. She turned to him, her eyes finally meeting his, and in a voice raspy from disuse, a voice that seemed to have been locked away for too long, she whispered, "Eliza." Elias froze. He hadn't expected her to speak, much less to utter a name, a beautiful, resonant name that seemed to fill the vast emptiness of the plains. "Eliza," he repeated, the sound feeling right, like a missing piece of a long-forgotten puzzle. A profound sense of understanding, of shared humanity washed over him, a powerful wave in the quiet desert air. In that moment, a bond, fragile yet undeniable, formed between them, stronger than any words could convey. The storm broke, and the rain began to fall, cleansing the parched earth, washing away the dust of the past, making way for something new, something full of unspoken promise. Hey everyone, if you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Every subscription helps us bring more captivating tales to life. Thanks for watching. With her name, Eliza, finally revealed, she slowly began to unfurl, though her past remained a tightly locked vault. She spoke in hushed, almost hesitant tones, mostly about simple everyday things: the changing weather, the needs of the animals, the rhythm of daily chores. Elias learned of her uncanny ability to calm even the most skittish horses with a soft touch and a low murmur. Her meticulous way of organizing the pantry, her quiet strength that belied her fragile appearance. He noticed the subtle flinches whenever a sudden loud noise erupted, a distant gunshot, the harsh clang of metal against metal. He also saw the deep sadness that sometimes clouded her eyes, a fleeting shadow that hinted at a traumatic past she wasn't yet ready or able to articulate. Elias, with his newfound patience and burgeoning affection, respected her unspoken boundaries. He never pushed, never prodded, just observed, patiently waiting for her to share what she could, when she could. He continued to leave small gifts for her: a brightly colored feather, a smooth, polished stone he found by the creek. Simple gestures that were met with those rare, shy smiles, fleeting glimpses of the warmth and gratitude within her. The ranch, once a place of stark, solitary routine, began to feel less empty, less desolate. There was a quiet companionship now, a comfortable rhythm that was slowly but surely transforming his world. The air seemed lighter, the sun a little warmer. One afternoon, while mending a worn leather bridle, Eliza's hands paused, her fingers tracing the faded, silvery scar on her left wrist, a long, thin line that disappeared beneath the sleeve of her dress. Her eyes glazed over, fixed on some unseen memory, and a single silent tear escaped, tracing a path down her cheek. Elias, who had been working nearby, saw it. He didn't ask, didn't pry, but he understood implicitly that her silence was a self-imposed shield, protecting her from memories too painful to confront, too raw to vocalize. He simply placed a comforting hand on her shoulder, a silent promise of support, of unwavering presence. The gentle pressure of his hand was a lifeline, an anchor in the storm of her unspoken past, a silent vow that she was not alone. The vast, silent plains outside seemed to echo the quiet intensity of the moment, holding their breath in anticipation of what might one day be revealed. As weeks turned into months, the unspoken bond between Elias and Eliza deepened, evolving from necessity to a profound, quiet affection. The ranch, once barely sustaining itself, thrived under their combined efforts. Eliza brought a quiet order, a gentle touch, and an intuitive efficiency that Elias, in his rough-hewn bachelor existence, had never known. Her presence was like a gentle rain on parched land, bringing life and unexpected beauty. Yet the unaddressed question of their relationship lingered, a silent elephant in the vast, open space of their lives. In the eyes of the isolated community, Eliza was simply the woman Elias bought, a situation that, in the rigid social codes of the Old West, would inevitably lead to whispers, judgment, and perhaps even legal complications. Elias knew he had to offer her more than just a safe haven, more than a comfortable existence. He wanted to offer her a future, a legitimate place by his side, a name that carried respect and belonging. One crisp morning, as they watched the sunrise paint the vast Arizona sky in fiery hues of orange, red, and gold, Elias turned to her, his heart pounding a nervous rhythm against his ribs. The air was cool and sharp, carrying the scent of pinon and damp earth. "Eliza," he began, his voice rough with emotion, unaccustomed to such pronouncements, I want to make this right. For you, for us. I want to marry you." He saw the surprise flicker in her eyes, followed quickly by a shadow of uncertainty, a fleeting ghost of past pain. "It would mean a home, a name, a life, if you'd have it," he continued, his voice a quiet plea. He extended his hand, not as a demand or a proposition, but as an offering, a lifeline across the chasm of their unspoken pasts. Her gaze met his, and for the first time he saw not just her pain, but her quiet strength, her deep resilience. After a long moment of profound silence, a silence that seemed to stretch into eternity, she slowly, deliberately placed her hand in his. The touch was tentative, feather-light, yet firm, a silent affirmation that echoed in the vast expanse of the morning. It was a promise made without words, a commitment forged in the quiet understanding between two solitary souls. The news of Elias Vance marrying the woman he bought spread quickly through the sparse, interconnected communities of the frontier, sparking a predictable mix of curiosity, judgment, and thinly veiled gossip. Elias, though a private man, understood the necessity of formality. He arranged for a circuit preacher, a stern but kindly man of God, to make the long journey to the ranch. A few neighboring families, out of obligation, genuine goodwill, or simply a thirst for spectacle, attended the small, humble ceremony. Eliza wore a simple dress Elias had purchased for her, a deep blue that remarkably brought out the forgotten color of her eyes, making them seem deeper, more vibrant. She looked beautiful, despite the lingering shadows of past trauma in her gaze, a quiet grace emanating from her. As the preacher spoke the familiar vows, Elias's large, calloused hand clasped hers, a silent promise of protection, devotion, and steadfast presence. When it was time for Eliza to speak, her voice, though still soft and a little raspy from disuse, was clear and unwavering. "I do," she whispered, her eyes meeting Elias's with an intensity that spoke volumes. It was a moment of profound significance, sealing their unexpected union, legitimizing their bond in the eyes of man and God. Yet even amidst the quiet joy of the ceremony, whispers circulated among the handful of guests, like dry leaves skittering across the dusty ground. Who is she, really? What's her story? The questions were unspoken, but palpable in the air. Eliza felt their eyes on her, their unspoken questions, their judgments, and a familiar sense of vulnerability. A ghost of her past life washed over her. She clung to Elias's hand, finding solace and strength in his steady, comforting presence. The world might whisper and judge, but in his unwavering gaze she saw acceptance, love, and a glimmer of hope for a future finally free from the dark grip of her past. The air, though still dry, seemed to carry a lighter, more hopeful current. If you're finding yourself drawn into Eliza and Elias's journey, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. We've got more compelling chapters coming your way that you won't want to miss. Married life brought a new, quiet dynamism to the Vance Ranch. The rhythm of their days, once dictated by Elias's solitary routine, now embraced Eliza's gentle influence. Eliza, now truly Mrs. Vance, slowly, gradually began to shed her protective shell, like a cautious creature emerging from its burrow after a long winter. She would hum softly while she worked, the tuneless melodies a testament to her growing ease, a sound that filled the once silent cabin with warmth. Occasionally, a genuine, unburdened smile would grace her lips, transforming her features from haunted to radiant, and warming Elias's heart in a way he hadn't known possible. He watched, patient and content, as she slowly, beautifully blossomed, like a desert flower after a long-awaited life-giving rain, unfurling its petals to the sun. One crisp autumn afternoon, the air smelling of dry earth and distant pine, while clearing out an old, long-abandoned shed on the far side of the property, Eliza stumbled upon a small wooden box. It was hidden beneath some loose floorboards, caked in decades of dust and shrouded in thick, clinging cobwebs, a forgotten relic of another time. Inside, nestled amongst dried leaves and forgotten trinkets, a rusty nail, a chipped porcelain button, she found a tarnished silver locket. As she managed to pry it open with trembling fingers, her heart a sudden drum against her ribs, a faded, creased photograph fell out. It was a young girl, no older than 10, with eyes strikingly, hauntingly similar to her own. A jolt of memory, sharp and agonizing, pierced through her, a white-hot flash of pain, as if a dam had burst within her mind, unleashing a torrent of long-buried images. She gasped, a ragged, choked sound, dropping the locket as her hands flew to her mouth as if to physically staunch the flood. Elias, hearing the sudden commotion and the faint, pained cry, rushed into the dusty shed, his boots crunching on the loose straw. He saw the locket, the small, innocent photograph on the floor, and the sudden, overwhelming distress etched onto Eliza's face, a terror he hadn't seen since that first day. She began to tremble uncontrollably, her body shaking with a profound chill, and then the words came. They tumbled out in a rush, a torrent of long-suppressed memories, raw, fragmented, and utterly unfiltered. She spoke of a brutal raid, the terrifying night her childhood home was consumed by unforgiving flames, the acrid smoke stinging her eyes and lungs. She recounted her family being violently separated in the chaos, her own desperate, terrifying flight through the unforgiving wilderness, every rustle of leaves, every snapped twig, a potential harbinger of death. She recounted years of hardship, of hiding in shadows, of perpetual crippling fear that had ultimately led her, broken, exhausted, and utterly alone, to that cruel auction block. She had been fleeing a ruthless gang of outlaws, led by a man known only as Blackwood, a name whispered with dread across the plains. This gang had terrorized her family and their small homestead, leaving her traumatized and completely abandoned. The mud at the auction, she revealed, was from a desperate, frantic attempt to hide in a remote swamp after being chased relentlessly for days, barely escaping with her life, her clothes saturated with the foul-smelling mire. Elias listened, his face grim, his jaw tight, his heart aching with a profound sorrow for the unimaginable pain she had endured, a weight he couldn't possibly fathom. The mystery of her past was finally unveiled, raw, heartbreaking, and terrifyingly real. The air in the small, dusty shed grew heavy, thick with the weight of her revelation, a truth finally brought into the harsh, unforgiving light of day. The harrowing revelation of Eliza's past brought a new, dangerous layer to their lives, one that shattered their fragile peace, but also ignited a fierce, unwavering resolve within them both. The outlaws, the notorious gang led by the elusive and brutal Blackwood, were not merely a ghost of the past, a distant memory of horror. They were a living, breathing threat, a tangible darkness on the horizon. Elias, his protective instincts surging with an intensity he hadn't known he possessed, immediately began to fortify the ranch. He reinforced fences, mended weak points in the cabin walls, checked and rechecked their limited arsenal, and despite her initial reluctance, painstakingly taught Eliza how to handle a rifle with practiced efficiency, every movement deliberate, every shot aimed for survival. He knew with a chilling certainty that he couldn't hide her forever. The vastness of the plains offered no true sanctuary from a determined enemy. The past, especially one so violent and unaddressed, had a way of catching up, a relentless shadow stretching across time and distance. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the vast western sky in ominous shades of blood orange and bruised purple, a lone rider appeared on the distant horizon, a silhouette against the fading light, a scout for the gang, a harbinger of the storm to come. Elias and Eliza watched him from the shadows of the porch, their hands instinctively reaching for each other, their fingers intertwining in a desperate, silent promise. Fear was a palpable, bitter taste in the air, a cold knot in their stomachs, but so was a newfound strength, born from their shared experiences and the painful truth that had finally surfaced between them. They knew a confrontation was inevitable, a reckoning long overdue, a battle for their very existence. Eliza, though terrified at the prospect of facing her tormentors again, her body tensing at the memory of their brutality, refused to be a victim. She had a home now, a husband who loved her, and she would fight for it, for him, for the fragile hope they had painstakingly built together. Elias, a man of quiet authority and deep loyalty, rode out to rally a few trusted neighbors, grizzled frontiersmen who respected him and intimately understood the harsh, unforgiving realities of life on the frontier. They were fewer in number, a small band against a formidable enemy, but they were determined, their faces set with grim resolve. Under the vast, indifferent sky, they prepared for the inevitable siege, knowing that their small, isolated ranch would soon become a desperate battleground, a crucible where their future would either be forged into something unbreakable or shattered into irreparable fragments. The air crackled with a silent tension, the quiet, ominous calm before the storm broke loose. The attack came with the brutal efficiency of a coiled rattlesnake strike. At dawn, a volley of gunshots shattered the deceptive morning silence, piercing the crisp, cool air like shards of glass. The ranch was instantly plunged into a maelstrom of chaos and violence. Elias and the few loyal neighbors fought valiantly, their determination unwavering, their movements honed by years of hardship, but the outlaws were numerous, their methods ruthless, their hunger for plunder insatiable. Bullets whizzed past with deadly intent, wood splintered under the impact of gunfire, and the shouts of men mingled with the terrified cries of animals, creating a deafening symphony of destruction. Eliza, despite her profound fear, moved with surprising speed and clarity through the mayhem. She loaded rifles with practiced hands, passed ammunition swiftly, and tended to the wounded with a calm efficiency, her resolve unyielding. Her past trauma had not broken her. It had, instead, forged her into something resilient, a steel blade tempered by fire. In the thick of the chaos, amidst the swirling smoke and the deafening roar of gunfire, Eliza's eyes suddenly locked onto a figure. Blackwood, the gang's leader, the very man whose actions had orchestrated the destruction of her past, the architect of her years of suffering and flight. A surge of raw, elemental courage, fueled by years of suppressed trauma and a fierce, burning desire for justice, propelled her forward. She grabbed a loaded rifle, her hand steady despite the tremor in her body, her aim surprisingly true, a predatory focus in her gaze. She confronted him, her voice, though still soft, carrying an undeniable power that cut through the din of battle. The confrontation was brief, but decisively violent, a swift and brutal end to a long nightmare. With Blackwood neutralized, his leadership shattered, the remaining outlaws, their will broken and their numbers dwindled, scattered into the vast, indifferent wilderness, fleeing into the dusty horizon like frightened vermin. The ranch was battered, scarred by bullet holes and fresh blood, the air heavy with the scent of gunpowder and dust, but they had won. In the aftermath, as the dust settled and the injured were tended to, their groans echoing softly in the silence, Elias found Eliza, exhausted but undeniably alive, sitting by the remnants of the fierce fight, a silent sentinel amidst the wreckage. He knelt beside her, pulling her into a tight, protective embrace, holding her as if she were the most precious thing in the world, the anchor to his new life. The silence between them was no longer one of unspoken pain or lingering mystery, but of profound understanding, of shared triumph, and an unbreakable bond forged in the crucible of conflict. They had faced the darkest shadows of her past together, standing united against the forces that sought to destroy them, and they had emerged, against all odds, stronger than ever before. The sun rose higher, casting long, peaceful shadows across the land, bathing the ranch in a golden glow. But for Elias and Eliza, a new dawn had truly broken, a testament to resilience and enduring love. Their future, forged in hardship and sealed by a single whispered name, was finally their own, a testament to resilience, love, and the enduring spirit of the American West. And that concludes the incredible story of Elias and Eliza. Thank you for watching this powerful tale. If you were moved by their journey, please make sure you're subscribed to our channel for more compelling and realistic stories from the heart of human experience. We deeply appreciate your support.